There are three things to never bring up with strangers around a campfire. That's religion, politics, and trekking poles. Today I'm weighing in on the hottest of these topics. Our viewer Waterman Ormsby at W10 wrote this. Video suggestion. Use of poles. Never used them 50 years ago, but used and still use a single stick, 8 to 10 feet in length, only for descents, to reach ahead and act as a third leg, taking some pressure off the knees. But you notice what he also says. I understand their role in balance, but find too short poles more trouble to carry and use and completely unnecessary while hiking. Now we need to be careful in not reading too much into his words. He writes, I find poles too much trouble. For him, they're a hassle and completely unnecessary. That's not the same as saying he thinks that's true for everyone.
I use them.
I think a lot of people who don't might benefit from them. They have their downsides. Today we'll look at pluses and minuses, but I warn you ahead of time, in the end, you still have to decide for yourself. A common claim is that poles save energy, but think about it. You're moving the same body and pack weight whether you use poles or not. The energy requirement doesn't get less. Poles help you distribute the effort, but they're not magic. If anything, they increase energy use. If you've ever used an elliptical trainer, you know that when you grab the moving handles, you take some of the load off your knees and legs, but it's not less tiring over time. Your arms take on some of the load that your legs would do if you didn't use the handles. Here's where poles help. First, they change stress on your joints, moving some of it from your knees and ankles to your elbows and wrists. Second, they help your balance. With 3 or 4 points of contact with the ground, you're more stable. Now, my legs feel less tired going uphill with a pack when using poles. That's because my legs do all the work when I'm not using poles. For me, poles are a benefit, but not because of energy use. For stream crossings and steep climbs and descents, poles can make things a lot easier. Now, there are downsides and times when they're a liability. The first time I used poles, my knees were noticeably better while my elbows were screaming. I call it trekking pole elbow. I'm sure it had to do with bad technique and an unaccustomed use of my arms. I remember thinking, I just traded knee pain for elbow pain. That's pointless. But once I got used to them, the elbow and wrist pain faded and my knees and ankles still felt better. I think that's a result of both the change in joint stress and the better balance. Waterman Ormsby uses a long single pole to reach ahead and act as a third leg, taking some pressure off the knees. That's both balance and joint relief. Now, there are times when the poles are a hindrance. First, when hiking over broken rocks or in terrain with a lot of roots, poles can get stuck, and as you're moving ahead, your arm gets jerked back when the pole doesn't come with you. Second, on steep rock scrambles, you're better off stowing the poles if it's going to be more than a few feet of climbing. Otherwise, you risk stabbing yourself or others you're hiking with. The wrist straps can cause chafing. It's never been a problem for me, but it could happen. Some ultralighters remove the straps, but that's self-defeating. They take some of the load off the grip and wrists. Otherwise, I'd have to death grip the handles the whole hike. At times, it is best to take your hands out of the straps for safety reasons, like anytime you may need to quickly release the pole, like short rock climbs where stowing the poles would be overkill. So how do you know if it's right for you? Well, you just have to try it out. You're not just climbing your favorite local hill without them and then again with them. That's too subjective. If you already want to use poles, you'll convince yourself that it's easier with them. Or maybe it is, and maybe the poles are a placebo. You really need to take them out on longer trips. One time when my son was particularly tired, I lent him my poles thinking they would help. And they really didn't. That's the confusion about the purpose of poles again. They may make your hike easier in many ways, but that doesn't mean you'll get less tired in any direct sense. Indirectly, by offloading some knee and ankle stress, you're less likely to compensate by adjusting your stride to something less efficient. The added balance may make difficult terrain a bit easier, and these can add up over time. I've seen it suggested that we adjust the pole lengths, shorter for uphills and longer for downhills, or one pole longer than the other if we're hiking along the side of a hill. That's going overboard. When I hear the suggestion, I know the person making it has never hiked in the real world, at least not on the types of trails I'm most often on. The terrain just varies too much and too frequently. It might make sense in a place like the Grand Canyon where long stretches of downhill into or uphill out of the canyon can last an entire day, or even some of the longer passes on trails like the John Muir Trail in the western United States. For the trails I spend most of my time on, like on the east coast of the US, changing pole length is just impractical. Just set the length so when you grip it naturally on flat ground, your elbows are at right angles. If you use a trekking pole tent, obviously you need them, but that's a choice you should make based on whether you already use poles or not. Don't buy a trekking pole tent unless you've already used trekking poles. Now, I rarely recommend one equipment design over another on this channel. I prefer to point out the pros and cons and when something works better. But with trekking poles, there's one design that is hopelessly flawed. I've come across two mechanisms for locking poles to the height you want. One is a mechanical lever, like I have here, that snaps in tightly. The other is a twist style that uses an expander inside the pole that applies friction to hold the section in place. The problem with the twist style is that as you hike, the natural twisting motion adds up after a while and causes the lock to loosen and collapse the pole when you need it most. Happened to me twice in the Grand Canyon, when I was fairly close to the edge of the plateau. A few feet closer and it would have been life-threatening. The lever locks are technically depending on friction, but it's much more secure and not prone to that twisting problem. Many quality gear manufacturers have abandoned the twist lock. It's something to avoid for sure. For the level style locks, there are often screws. Let's see, we've got one right here. There are often screws that need tightening. A small screwdriver is enough for infield adjustments. I've never had the need, but I keep a small Phillips screwdriver in my first aid kit just in case. It weighs next to nothing.
It's first aid for the poles. So should you use one pole or two? Depends on what your purpose is. Waterman Ormsby uses it solely for balance and bracing on downhill climbs, but I know he has to carry it the whole way.
A single pole may be all you'll need. I've seen some people hiking with a single commercial pole. It's natural for me to hike with two poles. I get load sharing spread out over miles of hiking. It's so natural that when I stole them for the steep climb up Katahdin and didn't bother taking them out again before reaching Baxter Peak, I felt like I was missing two limbs after I cleared the steep part. Well, what about a walking stick versus commercial poles? That's another thing that depends on use. As a probe and a very strong third leg, a pole may be sufficient. It's not adjustable in length other than the obvious solution of simply gripping it at the height you need. That's something you'll probably do subconsciously anyway.
The bottom line is this. Some hikers benefit from using hiking poles.
Others by using walking sticks. For some, they're just another thing that can break. It's up to you. Now, I hope I've been able to set expectations for you and give you something to think about. Whether you use them or not, it's a personal decision. There's no single answer for everyone.
If you appreciate this content, please like, share, subscribe, and comment on this or other topics you'd like me to cover. And if you haven't seen this video, please take a look at it now. Thanks for watching.